Manuel Pujol. He's from Barcelona. He studied business administration and has been working in the investment banking sector, probably till he embarked himself in a new adventure in 2013, 14, I think, that he started to work in Uber. I think it's a company that everybody knows about it. He's now the managing director in Uber Eats in Spain. So he will give us the perspective on a new company and a company that is making things different. And I think he probably have loads of things to add. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It seems I go from an evil company to another, investment banking and now Uber. I think it's very exciting for me to be sharing that with you because indeed I started with Uber. I started working with back in the days in 2014 a startup that was promising, but it hadn't achieved anything. And very recently I moved on to this new adventure or this new business that we're pretty much starting everywhere. It's a year old in most countries, which is called Uber Eats. So I wanted to share with you exactly what Uber Eats is, how we see. So I'm not a scientist, but I can give you a little bit of my perspective or our perspective into the market dynamics and how the market is evolving and one of the things that allow us to see in the future, and maybe have an open question to you guys on how food delivery is going to look like in 2050. No? And just a clarification. When I talk about food delivery, I'm talking about restaurant-produced last-mile food delivery. Eventually, there are going to be all sorts of logistics and all sorts of food delivery. I'm going to be talking about specifically restaurant last-mile food delivery. So, probably many of you know Uber. We started being a company that basically started trying to move people around. Very simple idea. Just press a button, get a car. Nothing too ambitious. But eventually, with scale and with technology, we kind of grew into this big companies in many countries around the world. And our vision became something that it is quite ambitious now. No? So we want to create transport that is as reliable as running water for everyone, everywhere, anytime. That means it's like when you open the tap and water flows. You don't know what's going on in the backstage, but you just know that there's water. No? So that's a little bit the idea behind Uber. So we started moving people around, but eventually this became also something else. No? So this is a fun anecdote. The reason why we started thinking about food was because we wanted to do a marketing campaign in 2013 where we just wanted people to be able to get an ice cream on a day in July by pressing a button. 4 years later, that doesn't seem as an achievement, but back then it was quite impressive. So we did this marketing campaign, and it worked out well. It was very fun to do. And the next year, what we tried to do was make it economically sustainable. No? So after that, we decided, okay, let's go into food. No? And actually, the first glimpse that you have at the market is quite interesting, because the same way that people transportation in cities didn't change for a long time, it also happens a little bit with food delivery. No? In Spain, for example, only 12% of people order, or 12% of the value is ordered through a website or a mobile app. Probably many of you know, especially if you are in Spain, I guess, that you have this phone number for this specific pizza place or Italian restaurant or Chinese restaurant that you keep on your fridge, and whenever you want to order food delivery, just call this number. No? The problem with that, and I'll go through what type of models you have. The problem with that is that this doesn't create a dialogue with the restaurant, right? It doesn't engage you with the restaurant, and therefore you end up ordering a very specific type of food. So I guess the most typical use case of food delivery is pizza, no? Or Chinese. And the reason why it's pizza or it's Chinese is not because we only like to get pizza or Chinese for food delivery. It's because the companies that have thrived over the years at delivering food have been companies that, for a certain number of reasons, have managed to deliver pizza in a way that is appealing to customers, or have managed to deliver Chinese in a way that is appealing to customers. But in reality, we should be able to order any type of food, and any type of food should be able to get to your place in a good condition. If you want a soup, it should be a soup. If you want a salad, it should be a salad. If you want a pizza, it can be a pizza. No? So that's why we went to this kind of new adventure, and we created Uber Eats. This is a different app. For now in Spain, it's only available in Madrid, but we hope to kind of bring it to other countries soon. And I wanted to kind of give you a perspective on the 3 stages that we've seen food delivery kind of evolve into. No? And the first one is this, what we call delivery 1.0. And this is what characterizes this type of delivery. So the majority of, or the order process is phone. You just literally have the phone and you call the restaurant, and you have to remember what is the menu that they have. You have to remember well, you need to have the number, you need to remember what food they serve, etc. The restaurant is in charge of getting this lead generation, or finding customers. And as you can imagine, if you're a small restaurant, or kind of a restaurant that has that only has like 1 location or 2 locations, it's very unlikely that you're going to start thinking about food delivery right away. You probably want to focus on your restaurant and make sure you deliver a really good experience, right? Therefore, starting a new kind of business where you try to capture consumers is very hard. Like, you suddenly see some restaurants doing flyering, and or some restaurant paying AdWord ads, etc. But being decentralized is very difficult for specific and independent restaurants to get new customers. Also, the delivery is done in-house. So if in this model, if you want to deliver your food, you need to not only have your restaurant business, but you also need to hire couriers that deliver the food for you. So you have an additional headache because you need to make sure that these guys have enough activity to sustain themselves, that the business is big enough for this model to make sense. And as I mentioned, the food type is very limited, because at the end of the day, the companies that have succeeded the most in doing that are the fast food chains or the quick service restaurants, where there's a very kind of everything is very processed, and in a way, like, they have investment power to create this additional food delivery system. What we're seeing that has happened rather recently in the last 10 years is that you've had what we call in the industry aggregators. And aggregators, what they do is they change these 2 things that you see there. So the first one is, okay, you don't need the phone number anymore to call a restaurant. We're going to put every single restaurant on a site, and you're going to have all the restaurants on the website. Like the phone book, no? So you'll have them all there. And you'll see the name of the dishes, you will see what the ingredients are, or the kind of the components of each meal. Therefore, you already create some sort of engagement with the customer, where you have like a little bit of a better experience when ordering. And what they've done, and this is very important, is they've kind of pushed together to get customers to switch to this new model. They have done massive investment to tell you and tell us, hey, now you can order online. It's a good experience. You should do it, and you should do it more often. But at the same time, it has a flaw, and the flaw is the delivery process remains in-house at the restaurant. Therefore, many restaurants are not going to embark into the hassle of kind of buying scooters, bringing couriers into the restaurant, and setting up all the process, which it can be very costly. And so what we propose, and what other platforms have proposed, we call ourselves marketplace. We also do this we push for the lead generation. We generally use the app as the channel to get users. But we do, and this is very different, is we have a pool of resources when it comes to couriers. Therefore, as opposed to having every restaurant a different fleet and every restaurant paying their own couriers, what we do is we aggregate all these couriers. Therefore, if you have one delivery a week, you only request the service once. If you have 1,000 deliveries a week, you request the service or the delivery service much more. And this what happens with this is when we go to a restaurant that is, as I mentioned, and that is focused on salads or soups, they never thought about doing delivery. Suddenly, when you tell them, no, you only need to cook and forget about everything else, they suddenly say, oh, I'm interested. No? So now you don't only have the pizzas and the Chinese and the kind of easy things that the fast food companies have created over time, but you have every single restaurant and some interesting examples. For example, in Madrid, we just activated a few weeks back a restaurant that only does cereals. They do cereals. They sell cereals for cereal lovers. I'm guessing that's the thing. But basically, you would never think about doing food delivery for restaurants. No? But what these platforms allow is for suddenly you have a lot more options, and this creates a different behavior in the consumer at the end. So I just wanted to share a few ideas that we've been seeing in the industry that have already crystallized in some way, and that are definitely gonna mark the future. I cannot tell you what this is going to look like in 2050, but I can tell you some of the kind of directions that we're already seeing. So the first one for restaurants, we're seeing two very interesting trends. The first one is related to the capacity of the kitchen. No? Suddenly, you have restaurants that have strong brands, but they have limited capacity to produce food. No? So a lot of restaurants, what we're seeing they're doing is, as they're not limiting their production to their existing facilities, but they are creating what they call dark kitchens. So they have a kitchen that is non-branded. You cannot go there and have food that is solely dedicated to delivery. So it wouldn't be a surprise to us if suddenly the strong brands, because they have this capacity problem, eventually get bigger and bigger at that. Also, virtual kitchens, that is not related to capacity problems. It is related to creating different or extending your product portfolio. For example, we have an Italian place in Madrid that decided that the poke bowl, probably you guys have heard what a poke bowl is. It's kind of trendy thing in the US and other parts of the world, that it was an interesting thing to have. No? So suddenly you have a restaurant that is an Italian restaurant, but part of the kitchen is dedicated to Hawaiian food and poke bowls. And so they have this virtual kitchen that only exists in delivery platforms, and you have the guys cooking spaghetti on one side and doing poke bowls on the other side. No? So those are a few of the things that we're seeing on restaurant. For consumers, we are evolving to an era where the apps know what you want and understand what your preferences are, and this is becoming increasingly important because we've seen kind of a lot of technology that is being developed across the food chain, and this is very important because eventually apps will also talk among themselves. For example, today we have an option in Uber Eats where if you order food when you're going home with an Uber and you order food, it tells you how much the food is going to take in comparison to your trip. Therefore, you make sure that you're not going to get before the food arrives. No? That is just an example, but eventually, it's more than likely that you will order. When you order, the app will talk to your healthcare app or whatever, and it will tell you, hey, be careful with the burgers because you've already had so many this week, and your cholesterol level is blah, blah, blah. No? So that's another thing we can expect for the future to come. And then in the delivery space, I think the list could be endless, but I think two of the things that are definitely going to mark the future of the delivery here is, one, we're getting better and better and better at batching the deliveries, and this is very important in terms of costs. One of the key kind of drivers for ordering or not ordering for food delivery is how much it will cost me. Therefore, if you manage to batch deliveries and be very efficient at that, the cost goes down, and people will be more willing to get food delivered. And then autonomous vehicles, and that also includes drones. It includes cars. It includes. We're definitely a long way. We have a long way to go there. But I think another thing that can definitely decrease cost massively is having vehicles that can deliver food on their own, no? Without any human influence. So those are just a few ideas. If you have any questions, let me know, and thank you very much.
How do you expect to integrate the food trucks in your system? Because food trucks is an operator at the same time as it's transport. Right?
So food trucks, it's an interesting one. There is. So, for example, in Spain, the issue mostly with food trucks is regulation, and there's very specific regulation in Spain determining where a food truck can serve food, because it has to do with the licenses that the restaurants have, and therefore it's a little bit complicated. But for example, when we started doing Uber ice cream in the US, it was mostly done by food trucks. No? So definitely it wouldn't be something difficult to do. And for very specific situations, I think it makes a lot of sense. For example, when you're doing a stunt, having a food truck that has the capacity to go somewhere where maybe there's an event or there's a concert or whatever, and providing the food there as opposed to kind of having multiple couriers going back and forth, it makes a lot of sense. No, but again, here is a place where we find that regulation still has to evolve.
We see that there are some digital platforms that are already disrupting the food supply chain and bridging farmers directly to consumer, or as much as they can. So you have like Blue Apron in the US, and you have Formigo in the London area. But you see that one of the biggest challenges that they face is that it's really hard for them to scale when it comes to distribution. So they're able to aggregate from small farmers and have much better nutritional produce, and also producing less food miles, but they lack the scalability. So how do you see that Uber Eats could take a role in that?
So I think that this is very important, no? Because at the end of the day, when you're trying to build a marketplace, because this is a marketplace, you need to have some level of liquidity or scale. Otherwise, the costs are too high. And one of the advantages that we have coming from Uber is that, especially in the US, the marketplace already exists, right? And we have a product that is called Uber Rush, still in the US and kind of still in testing or piloting mode. But Uber Rush will eventually do that. No, it will offer eventually Blue Apron or whatever company to tap into this pool of couriers or delivery men that can bring the product to wherever it needs to go, doing the last mile at a very affordable price. So we have the platform of Uber Eats, which is specific for Uber Eats, but alternatively, we also have a B2B product, Uber Rush, that eventually will come to Europe at some point, that could be helpful to bridge that gap.
It was kind of a related question, which is, as you mentioned, that one of the things that you bring is the biggest scale into distribution. What was the rationale behind going after processed food instead of going for all kinds of foods or any kind of product, not kind of like what Globo does? And how do you compete with the Globus of this world, that deliver to you any kind of service or product?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't part of that decision, but what I can tell you is that what we try to do is we try to find a very specific value proposition, no? And you have to start from somewhere. And eventually, what we felt was having a very wide value proposition, such as a company you mentioned or companies of the sort, it might be more difficult for us to tell our story and to say what we're doing. But eventually, it's an interesting business if you can make it work. And eventually, we're going to get there. I'm not sure in which form or when, but I think once we sort Uber Eats out completely, we can, or even in the meantime, we can start thinking about other options. But yeah, I think it's a matter of prioritization.
I was wondering, how much of this is still collaborative consumption of transportation?
So in Spain, we don't have a kind of collaborative model. We just use professional, either for the rides business, they are professional drivers, and in the case of the couriers, you're not required to have a specific license to do that, but you're required to have an insurance and a set of the driving license, etc. And you need to be registered as a self-employed or part of a company. Sorry, yeah.
So is this divergence of philosophy something that you will be adopting as a company hereforth?
Well, in reality, what happens is in the countries where we started with a model that was more collaborative, eventually rules were set up. No? To kind of the legal framework was adapted for us to operate in a way that legislators felt comfortable and law enforcement felt comfortable. No? So it's difficult to say at what point we are still fully collaborative, or we have certain rules of engagement, if you like. But the path that we've chosen in Spain is different, because the laws in Spain are different, and we had to adapt ourselves. No? So I wouldn't say that this is going to feed back into HQ in the US and suddenly we're going to change the model. I just think that we need to adapt. We're a very, very local company at the end. We have people in San Francisco, but we do need to have a team in most of the countries we operate. So we need to adapt.
So then how well curated is the shareholder value that you create in each locality? Like how easy it is for a small producer to affiliate itself with Uber and to take advantage of this structure that you're trying to perpetuate?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we have general guidelines, and there's a product that we need to sell, and mostly that in general terms remains unchanged. But at the end of the day, we have a local team. No? So if we find a restaurant that, let's say they already have their own couriers, no? So we see a way to adapt these guys into our system, and so that we can work together. Or we find one specific type of restaurant in Spain that doesn't like, for example, ice creams. No, we have a ton of places that sell ice cream in Spain, and in Madrid. So generally that doesn't happen. So we need to make sure that the people that are going to carry the ice cream have the specific packaging that will allow it not to melt, etc. No? So we do adapt locally, but the general guideline as a product, we need to maintain it.